welcome to another episode of the Community Broadband Beds Podcast. I'm Christopher Mitchell at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. I'm in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I'm here with Jordan Pittman, our digital opportunity lead. I'm just checking to make sure I got that right, who is just in town for our fall retreat. We all got together to talk about the Community Broadband Network's team. Jordan, you're still a part of it. Have you been updating your resume over the weekend?
Well, I was after the retreat, been reflecting a little bit on it, but I haven't got to a conclusion yet. But what I did go from the retreat and learned is that I'm not good in Mario Kart. I am not great at this.
That's an important lesson.
Yeah.
And also it gives people a sense of how we do things.
Yeah, I think that's the main lesson from the retreat that I'll gather. So
yeah, no, our priorities will be set by a Mario Kart tournament.
Absolutely.
We are going to talk today about a few topics informally. We're going to have a little conversational style. And that includes a little bit about what's coming next in BEAD and what comes after BEAD. There's been more talk lately about that. We'll probably talk just a little bit about what we see going on with SpaceX and Starlink, and a little bit on Verizon buying Starry and what that means. So, Jordan, when you hear what's coming next in BEAD, what are you thinking about? What should we talk about? We've beat BEAD to death, I feel like, but there's always more news coming down the pike.
Yeah, I mean, take a step back, right? Like, he was supposed to be this once in a generation, type of investment. So I think there's this notion for some folks is like, okay, once BEAD is out there, like that infrastructure aspect is done. And I'm thinking about moving forward how there's still some people that won't be connected even after BEAD. And then even if they are connected, my big thing is, are they going to be able to actually afford that connection? So those are things that I'm thinking about. But, Chris, I'm always curious on your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to try to figure out how many people are being left behind, because I'm somewhat stunned. If you told me that we were going to have a program to end all future broadband investment infrastructure programs, and it was going to be squabbling over 2.5 to 3.5 million locations, I would be like, well, what about the other 10 or 15 million locations?
Right.
And we're just pretending they don't exist, I guess, right? And this is a mix of things. This is a mix of homes that haven't shown up on the map fabric yet because it was such a disaster in terms of how bad the Federal Communications Commission put together the data of what homes exist, and so that we can then determine whether or not they had internet access. We have a bunch of homes that don't even exist on the federal maps where there's human beings living there who are American citizens. We have a whole bunch of locations that are assumed to have decent service because an internet service provider submitted documentation saying, oh no, we could totally serve them and all of their neighbors with this great service. Only it turns out that they might not even be able to get anything, or what they could get is really below what we would consider to be a decent internet connection. And there's a variety of other reasons why people have been left out too. And the result is that we're talking about a program that, if it goes well, and it's not going to go well, but at its best, BEAD was going to solve 20% of the problem in the end. And so, I mean, I don't know. I'm a little bit flummoxed in that. Some of this is Trump's administration. In that, if the Trump administration did the best it could, we would probably permanently resolve the issue for those 3.5 million homes or whatever that we're still talking about. But it's not.
Yeah.
Even so, the majority of the problem is still left untouched anyway.
Right. And you bring up a good point about the Trump administration, because it seems like we always have to bring them up. But I think their sort of philosophy on cuts, right? Funding cuts, maybe, we've seen the budget for BEAD, the restructuring of that as well. I think they have this idea as if we save money now, we'll save money in the long term. But it's the complete opposite. What we find over and over again with studies, when people actually does the work with mapping and, research, when they see it's hey, it might be a little bit up front now, but if we do this now, we will save so much more money in the long term. So it's incredibly frustrating that me and you might be having this conversation 3, 4, 5 years from now, where the next administration or an administration after that is hey, we didn't hit that last 15, 20%. So we need to do that. And then we're going to be here all over again. Because I think fundamentally, we still haven't fixed the issues of why people got left behind. What you brought up is the mapping. So I think what comes next for BEAD is we need to I don't know, local, state, federal level, we need to really focus on this idea of mapping, making sure locations are accurate, and that ISPs isn't just saying yeah, man, just trust me, bro. Like, just trust me that I'll be able to cover this place. You can have my word for it, even though historically I have not done that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's right. But a future effective program will have to have effective maps. Now, I think we might see that in some states. Some states might get serious about trying to figure out where decent internet access is to make sure everyone's well connected. I really only see enhanced federal commitment to another large broadband program as part of a jobs program. I think there's a lot of us who are looking at what's happening in the stock market. We're assuming that there's a major crash coming. There seems to be a significant AI bubble. There are a lot of warning signs. Now, I'll say that there's more warning signs in any given year than there are recessions or, like really deep economic turmoil. So maybe I'll look back at this and be like, wow, like I really overinterpreted that. But I would expect that we will see a significant economic downturn. And then the federal government will be like, well, what can we do to put people to work? And something you can do to put people to work is building good telecommunications networks. That might be fixed wireless, or it might be like getting fiber out to more people. It's not going to be satellites. I'll tell you that. That's not a good program to like solve a problem and put people to work. But right now, the Trump administration is pulling billions of dollars out of rural America, and that's going to have an impact. And we also have we're crushing the labor force in the United States as we have the silver tsunami of people that have grayer hair than I do are retiring. And so there's a lot of reasons to think that we're about to have a world of hurt. And after that, there's usually the threshold for whether or not the federal government wants to put money into something changes. So I'll say if the economy keeps humming along, I don't think there's a broadband program to deal with this. I think we move along. I mean, don't forget, this is a country in which we debate actively whether or not children should have health insurance. And so the idea that like someone in Washington, D.C. is going to lose sleep because millions of homes in rural America are paying too much for satellite or foregoing internet home service in their home because they can't afford it. They don't care. And as long as people keep voting for people who don't care, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. And, when you say that, Chris, it brings up a question I want to ask you. So it seems like, the big thing, even when we talked about BEAD the last couple of years, is like COVID happened, and that kind of prompt people to really see the significance of like having a good internet connection. What you're saying basically is like, well, at least on a federal level, there won't be a huge focus on maybe a program like this again, unless we have like a huge economic downturn, which I don't know, in return, it almost sounds like a New Deal of sense of like, if it gets that bad, we're going to need something just to get people back to work, and that working in broadband can be such a great way to do that. But let's just say, like you said, that doesn't happen. Like, I mean, this problem's still here, right? So like, what does it mean for those 15 to 20% of America? Are we just going to be like, well, there's Starlink for you, which we can go into Starlink if you want and be like, yeah, this is going to solve that for you.
Well, I think that's an interesting question, right? So Starlink continues to do well. And in that it's like serving more and more people. It barely qualifies as broadband by the federal broadband definition, which was is now 3 years old about, I think.
Just about, yeah.
And so we're seeing, I mean, this is where we have to get into forecast territory, right? Because like for Starlink to be able to continue being able to serve more people, higher quality speeds, they have to get the third generation of their satellites up for Starlink. In order to do that, they need Starship, which is the heavier launch vehicle. We're recording this one day after, I believe it was launch 11, and it was a successful launch. But people should understand what it was. This was a launch in which their version 2 of Starship was able to launch version 3 of the Starlink satellites successfully, but in a suborbital plane, I think. And so I'm not a big space guy. I'm trying to learn more about this stuff because it's really important for internet access in terms of the Starlink. But the problem with that Starlink has ultimately is being able to launch enough satellites and to replace them on the regular, which will require a lot of launches of heavier rockets than we are used to sending up. SpaceX is developing those, and V3 will launch either at the end of this year or the beginning of next year. That's going to be their best shot at having a reusable vehicle. They need to have a reusable vehicle to make it affordable to do so many launches, to get so many more bigger, heavier satellites up there. The problem is to be able to reuse that, they need to get the flights actually further out into space. All of the SpaceX launches with Starship so far have been suborbital, and so they don't have to get up to a higher speed to be able to go around the Earth multiple times. and they're barely able to make reentry. It feels like they've done it a couple times. They're still experimenting with it. Maybe they'll have a breakthrough, but I have mad respect for the scientists that went through all this stuff decades ago. And maybe Starlink's folks, like we have advanced materials now, we can produce them in higher quantities more rapidly, perhaps. There are reasons that we might be able to have heat tiles that are able to like withstand reentry over and over again, but we don't know yet. And so for people who are like excited about this, like I've been thinking about it. It's like Elon Musk, it's like this is an audacious goal, right? And this is what Elon does. And he's failed at a lot of them, and people tend to forget about that. They just pay attention to the audacious goals he's succeeded at. But think of it this way, like for Starship to be able to succeed, it's like Elon Musk is like, I'm going to jump off this 10-story building and I'm going to be fine. And he's like, to prove it, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to jump off this like 10-foot staircase. And he lands and he hurts his ankle. And then like a few months later, he does it again and he lands and he's okay. He's like, all right, now I'm going to jump off this 20-foot roof. And he like breaks his leg and he has to go back and he's waiting and he tries it again. He breaks it. And then he finally lands it. And he's like, see, I'm fine. I told you guys. Now I'm going to do that 10-story building. And it's like, all right, man, like maybe he'll figure it out. But like jumping off a 20-story or a 20-foot roof is really different from like a 10-story building. And like, there's still a major challenge that has to be met in order for Starlink to be able to do all of this stuff. We don't know if Starlink will be able to put up enough satellites with the tech to be able to serve millions more people with very high quality systems. The Ookla tests show that, when you do the speed tests en masse, that the average tests are like well below the upload speed that is needed for it to be broadband. And so the last thing I'll say in this diatribe is that, Travis from formerly of USI Internet, who, is back on the road again he keeps sending me his results, and Starlink has gotten better, and Travis is seeing good speeds. And not only that, but Travis is telling me how it's like only half the sky, and he's really excited about how it's going. But like, we're not seeing that in the mass reports that we are seeing everywhere else, that everyone is having as good of an experience. And then we still haven't talked about affordability, even after all that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot that you said, Chris, that I really resonate with. Especially, I actually am a space guy, like grew up like loving the space, man. That's just like my favorite cool like rule of thumb there. But the thing I really wanted to emphasize on was like this idea of like Starlink is good in like certain situations, but not on this mass scale, right? As this money is being transferred from rural America, from a specific like fiber broadband to Starlink, it's one of those where like, yeah, in theory, like, yeah, Elon can jump off a 2-story and say, yeah, I can jump off a 10-story. This is all in theory, right? Like the hope is that the technology gets better for them to actually connect these Americans. But this is all theory. We're playing theory and with real money with people who need connection now. That's the really frustrating thing about this to me. It's just like, yes, like I'm not a hater. Like I want this to work. I want this to be successful for people can have connection. Being able to connect from a satellite in theory sounds super cool. But what we've seen time and time again, as you just mentioned, is that the reports show that it does not connect people with a stable connection on the masses. Like I'm not going to connect to Starlink in Atlanta and be able to do this sort of call with you right now. So this money just keep on getting thrown to him with the hope. I'm just like, why hope when we already have proof that like there's other methods that can get people this connection right now? And that's like the most frustrating thing about this to me.
I'm entirely with you. I keep thinking about North Carolina as you were talking, right? Like the federal government, I mean, you said this earlier, the federal government during the pandemic is like, internet access is so important at this point. It is important for the economy. It's important even if we don't have a pandemic, right?
Yeah.
And people need to have access to this, right? This goes back, like one of the things about the United States is that back in the 1930s, we set the policy that we wanted everyone to have decent telecommunications. We revisited that in 1996, and we said everyone should have basic or the same connections at, not basic. I mean, that's the point, is that sort of everyone should have reasonably equitable access to the extent that is feasible, is the way it's been interpreted. And the federal government was like, all right, like we're going to put $45 billion into this. And we think it's so important. And then the Trump administration comes along and they're like, you know what? We're going to spend a lot less. And it's like, well, how good are the connections going to be? And they're like, we're not worried about that. We're just going to spend less. And it's like, well, people are going to be able to afford those connections. We don't care. We're going to spend less. And so the federal government gave North Carolina like 1.4, $1.7 billion. I don't know. It was well in excess of $1 billion to connect a certain number of locations. And North Carolina, following the Trump administration's new rules, is like, all right, we're going to spend, like a certain amount of that, and we're going to give you $1 billion back, or we're going to have $1 billion left over. So they're just leaving out 5 counties in eastern, western North Carolina are being cut off, and they're going to be reliant on Starlink in an area that's heavily forested with cliffs around them, with mountains all around them, and they got to give that money back. And like the Trump administration isn't even like, we're going to use that money for job training to make sure that like that we can have like the workforce that we need as we're like cracking down on immigration, because we're not going to have workers coming in from other countries anymore. And if anyone's listening, like I'm not trying to get political, but the facts are that there are a lot of people in the Trump administration who are trying to reduce legal immigration, not just illegal immigration, right? They are trying to reduce all kinds of immigration, and that has significant impacts on the workforce. The Trump administration, it hasn't said what they're going to do with the money that they're trying to claw back from the states. But we know that a previous Congress had said it is so important to us to connect everyone. We're going to spend like $1.5 billion in North Carolina. And now we're just saying, no, we're not going to spend that money. We're going to tell those people, good luck, you're on your own, and we're going to save the money for some indeterminate purpose at this point.
Right. It's frustrating because this is also the same administration when Doge was still doing its thing, being like, hey, our thing is making sure our government's efficient, that the money that you're spending with your tax dollars is going towards proper things. But what this is doing is you as the taxpayer, you're going to spend more long term on issues that we could have solved yesterday. So it's like at the end of the day, you're still spending more just for administration to have this sort of idea that like, hey, we're saving money for you. So this is the type of stuff like where hopefully people like us can be like, hey, like I know it sounds good what they're saying, but like the reality is like you're actually going to be paying more for this, and you're still not going to have a great connection, because the connection you're going to have right now is a Starlink connection, which again, in limited situations is really good. But again, Charlotte, North Carolina is not going to use Starlink.
No, and additionally, I mean, if you go back to connect this.
There you go.
From Friday, Doug had pointed out last week in a blog post on the Pots and Pans by CCG blog that he runs, that the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, has announced that people have to do all their filings online now, right? So if you live in Western North Carolina, the federal government just told you, hey, you're not getting anything better for internet access. Good luck. Try Starlink. We're going to get not only that, the ultimate slap in the face is, of course, rather than creating jobs and economic activity in your county, we're instead going to write a check to the world's richest man. And he's going to put stuff in space that he's going to then charge you more than $100 a month for. So they do that. And then they also say, and if were ravaged by a hurricane and you're trying to deal with FEMA, you have to communicate online now. It's a shot in the face. And I mean, it is so frustrating because it is not, I'm all for saving taxpayer dollars. I talk about this regularly. Like, I think we should have more efficient services. I frankly think we should spend more taxpayer dollars on being more efficient.
Yeah.
And then, so that we can be ready for the next freaking downturn. But what is happening here is not saving taxpayer dollars. This is about screwing people in rural America who don't have access to technology. It's about the people who have already taken it on the chin the most because of how we set things up in the past, and because of perhaps bad luck, or perhaps they made bad decisions. And now the federal government is like, too bad. We're not going to try to build a system in which you're able to access rights that you should be able to get. We're going to make it harder for you to access the benefits that you're entitled to after a natural disaster comes through, because we try to help each other out as Americans. It's so frustrating. And so it's important for people to understand, like the cost of this is being borne by the next natural disaster victims, right? Like, that's who's going to be punished. Now, those people might benefit in the short term from Elon Musk and Starlink, right? Because when the telecom lines go down, it takes time to get them back up. But in the longer term, they're going to be screwed by the fact that economic activity is leaving their region. New jobs aren't coming in because of the decisions that are being made by the federal government.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to tap a little bit into my degree because I did rural sociology. So this really hits me personally. So there's a graph for this, and maybe I can put it in the post or whatever. It's called the upward spiral and the downward spiral. So basically what it's saying is, usually, specifically with rural places, once one domino falls either positively or negatively, it just continues to fall down. So what you see in rural places, because it's amplified, because it's smaller, these sort of investments allows people to come into the town, bring jobs like you mentioned, And then once they're in, that kind of starts this upward spiral of improving not just the people who are coming for jobs or whatever, but just for everybody in the town itself. But when that is taken away, that spiral also happens downwardly. What you see, like, if there's less investment, there's not an incentive for people to come. If you're young, like somebody like me that grew up in like a rural town, it's like, well, there's no opportunities here for me. I might rather leave to go to like a better place, whether that's a city, whatever the case may be. And that actually continues to spiral because, as your point earlier, as more Americans get older and there's a lot more older Americans that are not working versus young Americans, like we need us more now than ever. And if you're not around, that's just going to continue to make the town almost a ghost town. So when we're seeing this investment shift, we talked about it before. There's a cost of doing nothing, right? If you don't do nothing and investing in broadband internet access, you're going to be left behind. I'm going to phrase this one. This is the cost of being stupid, because the cost of being stupid of actually not being able to invest these people intentionally. This is an intentional thing to take money away from here. Like, these places that voted for you is going to die. So it's one of those where it's important for me when I go back to my rural places to be like, hey, this struggle that's going on right now, this is intentional. And this is intentional by the people in power that don't see you as valuable. They see the pockets of Elon Musk more valuable. So it's important to have that structure in mind to be able to show them like, hey, there can be a better future if we allow it to be.
I agree. But it's important to note, I mean, Starlink will be something that is important to have.
Right.
However, we need to have something on the ground that is available. One of the other points you made that I would come back to is how quick this is going to happen, because we don't know when Starlink is going to be able to have enough satellites up to cover all of the demand and the throughput to be able to deliver high quality services on the regular. And as soon as they start perhaps lowering their price, they're going to see more demand. And so then it's going to be harder again to keep up those high quality services. If you're in a city, if you're in a suburb, if you're one of like 4 out of 5 Americans, you have access to internet access that's like a gigabit now, right? Like nearly everyone has that available, whether it's through a cable system that also has some slow upload or some faster upload depending on whether they've done the mid split or not. That's changing over time. But those systems are getting much better, much faster. Most people have much faster speeds at a much lower price than what Starlink is charging.
Absolutely.
And so that just gets us to the other issue, which is the thing that always drove me nuts during the Biden administration, was they called this internet for all. And it's just, aside from the fact that it's internet access for all, which is a small point, it was never about everyone, right? Like it was $45 billion for physical networks to get people service in rural areas. And then $2.5 billion plus some of the non-deployment funds that would have been left over in some states. So, but like it was, I don't want to say chump train change or Trump change. There's something there perhaps. But there's $2.5 billion for like job training and devices and affordability programs and things like that. And that money all just got taken away by the Trump administration illegally, unconstitutionally, and I suspect that might come back. But that was like the beginning of something that we needed much more of, and we're not seeing that at all. And so, we talked about all the people that were left out by the mapping. And so if we step back for a second, BEAD is going to cover like on the order of like plus or minus 3 million people, or 3 million households. And so we're talking about households, 3 million people in BEAD. There's probably another 10 to 15 million households who should be getting an improvement from BEAD, but are not because they were left out of a really bad mapping process.
Right.
And then you have probably another 15, 20, 25 million households who cannot afford services, and they live in an area where there are good services available. And I don't know when we're going to see something at the federal level on that. I think there's some states that are starting to get concerned about it, but we need more metros to be concerned, right? There's some places that are doing stuff. A lot of the cities that have municipal networks, they're trying to figure out how they can develop a variety of programs. We've covered a lot of them over the years where they have municipal networks that are really trying to make sure that everyone can benefit. I mean, Wilson, North Carolina is one of the best examples of this. They've had many programs over the years to figure out how to meet the needs of people who cannot afford a regular connection. And so we just have this larger issue then that's left untapped. That wasn't even contemplated really under the Biden administration as they talked about internet for all. And so there's a lot of work that has to be done still.
Yeah. And to your, we don't have to be on this too much longer, Chris, but your last point really hits me because you talked about the potential for economic downturn. But like, to be transparent, like my internet connection like cost is like $80. So if stuff gets more expensive and there's layoffs and people are losing jobs or just whatever might happen in economic downturn. But we increasingly tell people that more and more things are being digital. You're putting people in a really, really tough spot. Where you need to be online to pay your bill or to do things that you have to do online. Because for example, there's stuff even in Atlanta where the offices are closed or they're just like, hey, we don't accept paper in person. Like we only do it digitally. So if you don't have that and then you're struggling to pay bills, and oh, by the way, your plan is like $80, $85 for a decent connection. It's one of those where it's just like people are going to have to start making choices, but then you're going to get mad if people choose food over their internet plan and then not be able to turn in whatever they need to online. So it's one of those where my favorite. Oh, go ahead.
Do you remember Sean talked about this when the BBB bill passed? Remember?
Uh-huh.
With I forget if it was WIC or Snap. It was Snap.
Snap, right?
Yeah, and the federal government basically saying internet access is not essential, and then it's like, oh, by the way, we're only going to deal with you online with your non-essential connection that you're going to be penalized for having. You're going to get less in Snap benefits if you're paying for internet access. It's just this is incoherent, and that's one of the things that frustrates me is that I'm familiar with bad policy and I'm familiar with good policy, but incoherent is like really hard to deal with.
Yeah, it's frustrating, and I can leave it with this. When I'm usually driving around with folks in the city, and they ask me what I do, and I say, why is this important? I always tell them my favorite analogy is this is the equivalent of telling a community, hey, water is the most important thing you need to drink. You need to drink 8 cups of water a day. This is super essential. By the way, you have no access to water in your area, and if you do, it's like this dingy like well over here. And if you want something more, it might take like a year or two for us to finally come over here and do it because I don't think we can make any money actually putting like a proper well over here. So that's how I feel about this. It's just like you can't simultaneously tell people that this is important, but then don't give them the tools to actually have access to this important thing,
or actively deny them the tools, right? I mean, like when it comes to like municipal broadband in some of these states where people are the community is poorly served, and then you have a state saying you can't drill a well, like you have to buy it from this like European company that monopolized the water system.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like, yeah. Oh, by the way, if you want to do this for yourself and start, whoa, are you digging over there? What are you doing? You can't do that.
Right, you gotta get permission to dig from the water company in Europe that like bought out the local system.
Yeah, it's just incredibly frustrating.
So, Jordan, whenever I think about wireless access in the home, I think about some of the stuff that I saw, I want to say like 7 years ago with the 5G hype.
Yeah.
And I know that kind of predates your activity in broadband type stuff, but like there was this moment where Verizon signed a deal with the city of Sacramento, and they were basically like, I might be overstating it a little bit. My recollection was that they basically said that Sacramento had given them expedited access to the rights of way to put their wireless systems up and approve their permitting stuff. And so Verizon was going to have basically all the addresses could get like gigabit wireless service, within a few years.
Okay.
And then as best as I can tell, nobody ever checked back in. Every now and then I try to check in like once a year or so to get a sense of what had happened. And basically nothing happened. I mean, there might be a couple of neighborhoods, but they found that the millimeter wireless system they planned to use just didn't work well in the real world, right? It works well perhaps in a laboratory, but it didn't work in the real world. And so I saw that Verizon buying Starry, which was an ambitious company and was very well reviewed. Its customers tended to like it, according to the reviews, if I remember correctly. But it tried to expand super fast. It wanted to be one of the big boys. And so rather than, scaling up in a way that was responsible, it overstretched and collapsed. So now Verizon has bought it. I don't know exactly what that includes. I mean, they had some spectrum. They had some patents, I think. They had a great engineer who was working for them, if I remember correctly. And I'm just trying to figure out, like, is this something that like, is Verizon really going to go back to this wireless to the home? And I don't know. When you hear this sort of like, I feel like we know that getting a fiber out to the homes in our areas is economical. And it's a multi-generational investment that will pay off in the long term. Absolutely. But these big companies, they're allergic to spending this money because Wall Street will punish them. The investors won't like them if they're putting too much, CapEx out, capital expenditures out each year. And so they're trying to find ways to, just get through. And I'm curious how you react.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear that, it's a constant reminder for me of how these big corporations would much rather buy mergers, sort of like property in the sense of like not allowing anybody else to do it, instead of just actually doing their job of doing the service that they've been told to do, or they even proclaim that they will do. I think that's the most frustrating thing to me. It's like you actually would save more money, in my opinion, to actually just do the thing that you promised to do. Instead, you will much rather save because of name brand or whatever. It's like, we are Verizon. You can trust us that we're going to cover this. And then nobody checks in and does it. And then when somebody else maybe comes in and is like, hey, actually, I've noticed Verizon hasn't done this. Maybe we can do the due diligence of doing this. They're just like, no, are you trying to mess up our little thing over here? It's like, we're going to buy you. And then then we're still not going to do it. And it's just like, it's incredibly frustrating because it's almost like they're more focused on the short-term profit than the long-term profit, which I don't know, I'm not in those rooms with those stakeholders, and it's just like, yeah, if I was in there, I'd be like, hey, just a thought, we actually could make more money long-term. It won't be immediate, but we could really make an impact, either by the money that you're going to receive from that or the multi-generational basically profit that's going to come from this. But it seems like it's very tunnel vision, like how a lot of these big corporations think. And it's just incredibly frustrating because at the end of the day, they're not actually doing the thing that they say they're doing. And then you said it earlier, Chris, nobody really checks them on that. It's just kind of like, yeah, man, we trust you on that. And then it's almost like a slap on the wrist if we find out, oh, well, Verizon didn't do that. Oh, well, like nobody gets punished. Nobody gets penalized. Like it's almost like they can just continue to do this. So if I was a corporation and I saw that I can continue to do this and I don't get punished, why wouldn't I keep on doing it?
Yeah. No,
I'm not saying that's a good thing to do, but if I'm in their shoes and I can do this without any penalty, I'm going to keep on doing it.
Incentives matter. I agree. And I do think you're right. Like, I mean, this is a standard critique of a lot of these companies. It's eating your seed corn is like the old school way of saying it, which is you're basically trying to figure out like, how do I benefit in the next quarter or two in order for my CEO to hit their targets and get their payout and then get out of town.
Right.
And the shareholders are all left with less profit overall because it's been poorly managed. I mean, this is our critique, right? Is that like, this is inevitable with the big companies. And that's why we need more cooperatives and municipals when it comes down to this infrastructure that is core, right? The entire economy is built on this. Like if you're going to build a watch, if you're going to build a phone and compete with Apple, or if you are Apple, like fine, like these are important things in our lives too. Like I'm not going to trivialize it, but it's not the infrastructure the entire economy is built upon. And the idea that we should have these same companies playing their games, building the infrastructure that every other business depends upon is a poor way to run things. And it's why things go poorly, frankly, why communities are disinvested in, why we have so many people that cannot afford access. We don't have good choices. That's why you're paying $80 a month, right? It's not because like you chose that.
Right. Absolutely. And it's just, and I want to take a step back because it's just like, it starts a bigger conversation. It's like we need other players in, and that's why we advocate for this, like co-ops and everything. Because like as a business, their goal is to make more money this year than last year quarterly. So it's like they're just playing the game, and their head is like, yeah, maybe it'll be really nice to serve these communities, but if I, as Verizon, like let's say, try to be very humanitarian and actually do a little bit more on that, they know AT&T is not going to do that. And they're going to get behind. So it's just like, It's almost like, and I'm not giving sympathy to them, but it's almost like they're put inside their own box of their own making. It's like, well, this is the game. If we do decide to not choose profits and actually choose people, like we're going to be left behind and maybe we'll make less money and then AT&T would buy us, because that almost seems like the game, right? So
that's exactly it. I mean, that's our critique is that at the end of the day, if you're trying to figure out how do we fix Comcast, you're not changing anything. That's not how the system works. You can't and I say all the time, Comcast and Charter are two very different companies. Comcast puts a lot more money into communities doing digital equity. They put more money also into preventing competition. And they're more effective at preventing, competition from cities making their own investments than the other cable companies are. But they also put more money in where their mouth is to support like low income communities. And so they're different. But like if Brian Roberts decided that, I'm going to run this thing like Wilson, North Carolina, I'm going to make sure that like we're a utility, he's going to retire the next day and it won't be his choice. Right. Yep. Like the board of directors is like, I don't know what happened to you, man. Like you used to be cool, but now you're not cool and we got to get rid of you. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah. And, There's a phrase for it. It's called like golden handcuffs, in the sense of like you are locked by the success of what you've done previously in your past, to a point where if you try to undo those handcuffs, not only is that difficult, but like people are going to look around as like, well, why would you do something like that? Because we have this good thing going. It's like we're making money. It's like if people aren't critiquing us enough and we're able to get away with it, why should we change? Because if we change, then we are going to be the sore thumb that get kicked out. So it's almost like, that's why I tell people I don't get mad at a particular company, because like it is a sort of systemic thing where it's like they're all just trying to do what either their stakeholders or they're just doing what they're told. So it takes us, the people, to be like, hey, we got to hold you accountable, because I know you're doing this, but we are still people. And like, there's something that's more powerful than the money that they're making at the end of the day, because it is about this. It's about this connection. So being able to hold them accountable and be able to do our own thing and have the laws put aside, so where if we do want to dig our own hole, like that analogy we did earlier, and make our own well, we can.
I want to come back then to, we'll bring it full circle back, right? We were on the retreat last week, and what you're saying, I just want to come back to the thing that is my critique of what some of the people on our team, which is that, like, you know, the issue I think in my mind is not profit. And you could tell me that you can tell me I'm wrong. You could tell me that now or later, like publicly or not. But the issue, to be clear, is also like, it's not one of profit. There's a lot of small, locally rooted for-profit companies that make money. Some of them make a little money. Some of them make, more money. None of them make billions of dollars a quarter like AT&T or Comcast, right? That's the danger there, is not profit, right? Because, I mean, at the end of the day, I will say that, like, we call it net income for a municipal utility, but a municipal utility wants to have more money at the end of the year than not, right? So it can put it in a rainy day fund, or it can give it back to the community in something that's called in lieu of taxes, which is a payment in lieu of taxes, which is like the way that utilities invest back in local government as though they were subject to taxes like private companies, right? Like, I don't want a utility running a deficit. And so profit, in my mind, is not the challenge. Is excessive profits, profits at the expense of people.
Right.
That's the damage right there, is when you're a psychopath. And so, like, the issue is the scale of the profit, not whether or not there's profit.
Yeah, no, I actually really completely agree with that, because like I can make a profit off selling my couch, but if I have so much profit where I buy all the couches and then I therefore choose the price for people to pay for their couch in their house, and it's an excessive price, and that's a different thing, right? So like, there is nothing wrong inherently with making money, making profit. It's when those two things you just said, when it's excessive, and usually when it's excessive, that means you're choosing profit over the people that you're either working with or the communities that you're serving. So that's like sort of the bigger conversation we need to have. And I feel like for a lot of these corporations, that's where we are right now, where they're record saying, oh my God, we made $1 billion in profit, but then like there's still the people that they serve in these communities, like, AT&T, for example, like we know people aren't connected. So it's just like there's just disconnect that hopefully with more discussions like this, it can kind of lead to people asking more questions about, so record profits, huh? But like, what about my neighborhood?
I think it might be time for you to go back to couch shopping. I think that's on the top of your head.
It is on the top. I have a white couch like right over here. I need to sell it. I hate it. So it's just like,
man, even if I had a white couch, it would be a white couch for like 2 days. I am a messy person.
Yeah, I'm done. So I will be trying to get a profit from that, just to get a better couch.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
That's Jordan Pittman, our digital opportunity lead. I can remember this. Digital opportunity lead. So yeah. Thanks, Jordan.
No, thanks, Chris. I appreciate it.
We have transcripts for this and other podcasts available at communitynetworks.org/broadbandbits. Email us at podcast@communitynetworks.org with your ideas for the show. Follow Chris on Blue Sky. His handle's @SportsShotChris. Follow Community Network's stories on Blue Sky. The handle's @CommunityNets. Subscribe to this and other podcasts from ILSR, including Building Local Power, Local Energy Rules, and the Composting for Community podcast. You can access them anywhere you get your podcasts. Catch the latest important research from all of our initiatives if you subscribe to our monthly newsletter at ilsr.org. While you're there, please take a moment to donate. Your support in any amount keeps us going. Thank you to Artie Hughesby for the song Warm Duck Shuffle, licensed through Creative Commons.